I didn't start out believing in any of this. I took the night shift because it paid $18 an hour, and I figured I'd have time to study. That's it. No big dream. No childhood fascination with flashlights and walkie-talkies. I got laid off from my daytime job at a little print shop, and the rent didn't care about my feelings. So when I saw the listing for overnight security at an old mall on the edge of town, I clicked apply, smiled politely in the interview, and told them I could start right away. The mall was one of those places we grew up in without realizing it. My friends and I learned to skateboard in the back lot. I bought my first pair of decent shoes there. I had a terrible date that ended with both of us pretending we needed to help our parents with something. By the time I signed the employment paperwork, the place was technically still open during the day, but it was a ghost. 3 stores left. A nail salon, a discount shoe place, and a weird little aquarium store that always smelled like salt and plastic. Most of the gates stayed down. Most of the lights stayed off. Management contracted a tiny security company to cover the building overnight until the city decided what to do with it. Demolition was being discussed. Conversion to storage units was on the table. You know the drill. In the meantime, my job was to walk a figure-8 route around the concourses, check doors, log temperatures in a few mechanical rooms, keep the junk kids out, and call the cops if anyone tried to break into the old anchor store that still had some fixtures they were trying to salvage. Easy money, I told myself. Peace and quiet. My first night, Manny trained me. He was in his late 40s with a face that did not smile often, but when it did, you felt like you'd earned something. He wore his baseball cap backwards and had the kind of tired eyes that come from a lot of night shifts. He showed me where the radios lived, where the master keys hung, which interior doors needed 2 hands and a shoulder to open. Basic stuff. He showed me the lockup procedure for the few places that still had employees leaving late. He also showed me a binder. It said site protocols on the front in block letters. On the inside, the usual contents, emergency numbers, the thermostat schedule, instructions for the generator. There was a page about the public address system that I skimmed until I saw Manny's finger stop me. He tapped the page twice with his nail and said, "You read that one out loud." So I did. PA system is to remain off during overnight hours. Do not use to make announcements. All communications should be kept on radio channel 1. I paused and looked at him. "Okay. Keep going," he said. "Test chimes should not be activated. If you hear chimes, check. Whoa. If you hear chimes after 2 a.m., do not respond on the radio with your name. Use badge numbers only." I laughed a little. I should not have laughed. What? Is that an HR thing? Like no names over air? Manny's face didn't change. Keep reading. There was a line about the West Concourse lights being on a timer that sometimes glitched, between 2:13 and 2:17 specifically. If they flickered or came on full brightness, the instructions said to stand by at the nearest junction and wait it out. There was a note about the play area near the old food court. If you observe a child in or near the play area after midnight, do not approach from the front. Ask them to take your hand and walk backwards with you. Do not break eye contact with them until you reach the atrium. I read that twice because it sounded like a prank. Like hazing. And this, Manny said, reaching behind the page to a sheet he had paper-clipped there. It was handwritten and wrinkled. He let me read it, but he didn't let me take it. Never say your full name out loud in the building after midnight. If someone on the radio asks you who else is on, you say badge numbers or 2 on site. and that's it. If you hear music that you can't find the source of, go to the nearest water fountain and run it for 30 seconds. If you smell cinnamon on the East Concourse, turn around. If you see yourself on a monitor lagging behind by more than a few frames, cover the camera. And if you get to the door of the old arcade and it looks open more than an inch, call me. Don't go in. I read that list while a part of my brain kept wanting to look up and catch him joking. He didn't. He watched me read, waited for me to finish, and then took the paper back. He folded it and put it in his left chest pocket like it was a photograph. "Okay," I said finally. "So that's the fun local stuff." Manny put his hat back on. "You'll do fine if you follow it." "I'm not trying to be disrespectful," I said. "But what happened? Why these rules?" He opened his mouth and didn't say anything for a second. In that pause, something clicked in the overhead, and one bank of lights a few stores down buzzed to life. We both turned to look, and the buzz died, and the light didn't come on. The mall made all the noises of a building breathing. Expansion creaks, a compressor cutting in somewhere, the sigh of air pushing down a long return duct. "People are messy," Manny said. "They leave doors open. They add dumb timers to save money. A lot of dumb timers. They cut corners and they forget to tell you stuff. That's 80% of it. And the other 20? You'll figure it out," he said, and started walking again. We did the route. He showed me the boiler room with the hum so low you felt it in your teeth. He showed me the maintenance corridor behind the anchor store, where they stacked all the seasonal decorations going back to when the mall had money. There were Easter bunnies with one eye, and a Santa missing his beard, and cardboard turkeys flattened against each other like a totem pole. He showed me the mezzanine above the old food court that you could only get to by an unmarked metal door. We climbed up and stood there, looking down at the empty tables and the dry fountain with a ring of coins, dull as fish scales in the bottom. "Kids used to camp out here for concert tickets," Manny said. "Like Tent City. Whole thing packed. You think about that when it gets slow. That it was loud here. It'll help." I nodded. My world had been wallpaper patterns and copier toner for 3 years. I could do loud. I could do quiet. I could do anything for $18 an hour. We finished the route, and it was time for Manny to go home. He was on days for the rest of the week, and I'd be alone until 6 when the cleaning crew arrived. He stood with me near the front doors. The automatic openers were turned off at night, so we both had to lean into the heavy glass to push them. Out in the dark lot, his truck threw a loop of white light that skated across the fake marble of the floor and made the reflections jump. "If the radio crackles and you hear your name, you don't say anything," he said. He handed me the one good flashlight and kept the older one. "If you hear a kid crying, you go slow. If it's past 2 and you get a call from a number you don't know, you don't answer it inside. Step outside and take it." "You're really sticking with the bit," I said, trying to make my smile sound less thin. "Don't make me come back because you decided to be braver than you are," he said. "There's nothing to prove. You'll be alone and that building is weird. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to keep you here." He left. The mall ate the sound of his truck the second the doors closed. I stood with the click of the latch in my hand and listened to the space expand around me. The PA speakers along the ceiling looked like barnacles that might decide to open. I shook it off and checked my radio, and took a breath that I later realized was my last normal breath of the night. You know how night shifts go. The first hour was fine. I walked. I shined a light into shadow. The floor reflected me in 100 slices, each tile like a little mirror under my feet. I passed the old arcade. The metal gate was down and rolled tight like a closed eyelid. I passed the nail salon. There was a poster of a woman with perfect hands and the worst smile I've ever seen. Her eyes never tracked right no matter where I stood. The ceiling in front of the aquarium store had a brown tea stain that was shaped like a rabbit the first time I looked, and like a melted face the second time. These were the things my brain did when it had too much space. At 12:06, a chime sounded, not the big PA tone, a little sound, like the bell you get when you open a door at a boutique. It came from the East Concourse and nudged at me the way a sound does when you don't know if you actually heard it. I stopped. I looked at my watch. I remembered Manny's page. The note had said 2 a.m. for chimes. This was early, so I let myself treat it like a regular weird noise. I kept walking. There are 6 drinking fountains spaced evenly through the mall, 2 on each concourse. Old habit from the days when this was a running track around Christmas. People would walk the loop in shoes they didn't buy here and stop to sip and gossip. Every time I passed one, I touched the button just to hear that slurping suck noise. That sound means life in an empty building. There's pressure. Something is moving. The second fountain I encountered was not slurping. It was hissing, not the sound of water. Dry hiss. I bent closer and the hair on my arms lifted. It smelled like dust and something sweet. Not cinnamon. Sugar about to carbonize. I took my hand off the button and the hiss stopped. "Copy," I said, not actually responding to anything yet. I needed to hear my own voice. Radio silence followed. Good. It meant the only voice in the air was mine. Near the old Macy's, the mannequins leaned into each other like players on the sidelines. One had the kind of cracked neck you see on old violins, and I swore the crack looked a little wider than when we passed earlier. I put that in the mental folder called "It's Fine" and kept moving. You make routines in empty spaces because they teach the space how to treat you. That's what I decided. On the third lap, I stopped at the dry fountain and took 1 coin out of the crusted ring by pinching it with a napkin from the food court. I held it in my palm. I walked the rest of the route with it and put it back in a different place. A little move to make the mall feel like we were both doing something. Don't laugh. It worked. My footsteps got into a rhythm. The air conditioner settled into a low growl that I could tune out. I started to plan what I would eat when I got home, and whether I could nap for an hour before my online class. At 1:17, my radio crackled and Manny's voice said, clear and simple, "You good?" I was ready to be sassy about it. Still breathing. "Okay," he said, and I could hear his truck in the background. Probably his driveway. "Text me if the west lights go." "Yup." I clipped the radio back and thought about how much nicer his concern made the building feel. A link to another human. Cool. At 1:32, a shadow moved inside the old sneaker store. That was not cool. I stopped. I did the flashlight thing you see in movies. Big fat beam that turned every piece of glass into a glare. The gate on the sneaker store was down. The lock looked untouched. The shadow puddled and evaporated as soon as I looked directly at it. It might have been a reflection of me. It might have been a moth. I stood for a full minute to argue with my own objections, then took a picture with my phone of the storefront, so I could check later whether anything changed. Hey, I told you, I didn't come in here looking for ghosts. I'm not above getting spooked, but I try to be practical first. At 1:44, the smell hit me. Cinnamon. Not bakery cinnamon. The fake air freshener stuff that makes your throat feel furry. I was on the East Concourse without realizing I'd drifted that way. I had been avoiding it. The aquarium store always looked like an accident about to happen. But there I was. And there was the smell. And there was Manny's rule in my head saying turn around. I did. I turned around like a kid in a traffic safety video and walked back toward the central atrium. And as I took those steps, something in the overhead speakers let out a sound like static briefly forming a word. I didn't hear a name. I didn't. But I heard the shape of a name. The way radio noise sometimes almost sounds like your mother far away. I kept walking and the smell thinned. You ever hold a note in your throat because it seems like singing will prove there's something to answer? That was me for the next half hour. I walked. I did not hum. I did not whisper. I let my body move and I told my mind it could think about many things, except the fact that my name is a handful of sounds, and if you turned them sideways, you could throw them like a hook, and maybe a speaker would catch. It was 2:13 when the West Concourse lights went strong for a second, like a camera flash. The binder had been specific about that time, like whoever wrote it knew the exact ghost. My heart reacted, even as my head said, yes, okay. That must be when the timer ticks over. They went full bright for less than a breath and stepped back to the night setting. I stood at the junction, as instructed, and waited. After 15 seconds, something shifted in the reflection on the store window across from me. My head turned toward the movement, and I realized it was me. Only the me in the glass was breathing wrong. He was late by a beat, then two, the rise and fall not matching my chest. I lifted my hand slowly, because that's the kind of guy I am, apparently, and my reflection lifted its hand but got the angle wrong. It floated there, and then corrected like a video buffering. I covered the camera above me by standing directly under it with my hat up to block the line of sight, and the reflection jerked, caught up, and matched. I didn't text Manny. I didn't want him to hear a quiver in me and decide I needed to be coddled. I let the lights do what they were going to do for the next few minutes. They popped once more at 2:16 and then settled. I was about to step away when the PA chimes sounded. Not the little boutique doorbell from earlier. The real system. 2 tones that should have been followed by a cheery voice saying we were closing in 30 minutes. Only there wasn't a voice after. Just a breathy hiss, like a person leaning in, but not yet deciding what to say. I looked up at the nearest speaker. It looked back the way a mouth looks back when you stare hard enough at lips. No movement. No anything. Just the way empty places shape sound so you feel seen through your ears. My radio clicked, and the click had structure. It's hard to describe that. When you key a radio, there's a characteristic flatness, breath and plastic. This click was thicker. The air around it warped. A voice came through that was not Manny and not Alex, the morning guard, and not anyone I had met or held hands with or fought with. It was a boy, and it was mine. Hey, it said, a loose whisper. End of the hall. I hate how fast my body tried to go. I hate that I took one step before thinking. Manny's rule about kids, the play area, walking backwards. My mind shuffled through those sentences like files in a drawer, and found one that fit nothing about the moment except my pulse. "Badge 4, I said into the radio with my thumb on the button so I wouldn't slip and say my name. "Radio check." Silence. "Badge 4, radio check." The boy exhaled. That sound came through all the speakers at once, so soft you'd think it was a sighing vent if you didn't feel it thread your ribs. "End of the hall," he said again, and this time I heard the end of a laugh glued to the end of the word like chewing gum. I remembered Manny, his tired eyes, the list he didn't let me keep. "If you get to the arcade and it looks open more than an inch, call me. If you hear a kid crying, go slow. Never say your full name. Don't answer calls inside." I took my finger off the radio, and my phone buzzed. It was a number without a name. Unknown caller. I thought about stepping outside, and then I thought about the sound the door makes when it closes behind you and how loud it would be in the empty glow. I didn't answer. I let the call fade and left it on my screen like a talisman. When I made myself move, I did it toward the atrium, not the hall. You'll be proud of me for that sometime later. In the moment, I was angry at how slow my legs felt and how fast my heart could make itself be heard in my ears. The play area sat in a little bowl of carpet like a stage. There was a plastic tree that had been sticky when I was a kid. They pulled it out a few years ago, so now only a circle of darker carpet remains, the ghost of a tree. Same with the fountain. Water gone, coins left. The tables around it looked like someone had set them for a party that never happened. I hated that I could picture people in those seats. A dad trying to cut a slice of pizza smaller than physics allowed. A girl with a handle on her soda cup like a purse strap. A group of boys who covered fear with laughter. There was a boy in the play area. He stood on the exact place the old tree used to shade. 10 years old, maybe 9. Thin shoulders under a hoodie that said something that didn't matter. His hands hung heavy by his sides, like that's where all his thoughts had slipped to. His face was turned toward me, but his eyes were somewhere behind me and above me, like there was a ceiling I couldn't see. He looked the way a photograph looks when you know the person couldn't hold that pose without trembling. I stopped on the edge of the carpet. The radio was at my shoulder. Manny's voice saying, "If you see a child after midnight, do not approach from the front. Ask them to take your hand and walk backward with you. Do not break eye contact until you reach the atrium." Okay, I thought. Okay, we can do rules. "Hey buddy," I said, and kept my voice level. "We're gonna go this way. I'm gonna put my hand out and you can take it. We're gonna walk backwards together to the bright part. Okay?" He did not flinch at the sound of me. He did not blink in that way that catches a person and makes them real. His focus stayed glued to some place above my shoulder, and the fact that he could do that made my eyes sting. Every instinct in you wants to walk around the front of a kid and crouch down so they see you as someone not scary and not tall. The rules said not to. I listened to the rules. I put my hand out, palm up, because that's what you do with skittish animals and tired kids. I watched him watch the air behind me while my skin had its own brain and convinced itself it could feel cold moving over it. My hand hung there, a piece of me that felt disconnected and too alone. The boy's hand moved without his eyes following it. He reached out like he was sleepwalking, like his hand had learned from 100 safety lessons how to find mine, even when the rest of him had stayed behind. His fingers were cool and small and strong. He squeezed once, and that little human pressure went up my arm like a good fever. I nearly cried at how simple and good that squeeze felt, and then I remembered to walk backward. We moved together like a magic trick. Back step, back step. My thighs prickled with awareness of how wide the space was, and how stupid the space could be if it wanted. I kept my eyes on his eyes even though they weren't on me. We took 6 steps. At the 7th, the radio broke with a whisper that was not quite a word, and could have been my name if you lined it up with the right wind. I felt the boy stiffen. His hand tightened on mine until the tendons at his wrist stood like cables. "Keep going," I said. "You're doing good." Something behind him moved. I did not look. I felt the shape of it like you feel someone standing at a door. Sound travels differently in big rooms. It gets lost and finds you again from the wrong direction. But this sound moved like it had feet, and the space around it closed. It came from the arcade. Even with my eyes locked, I knew that. The arcade gate was up by an inch, maybe 2. "Okay," I said to the boy. "Okay." We took 2 more steps. The floor on the 7th squeaked because that tile always does. I was almost to the atrium. I could see the graffiti some kid had scratched into the aluminum edge of the table nearest me. A heart and initials. The kind of mark people make when they want to promise something to time. I tightened my hand around the boy's. His skin felt very thin, and then it didn't feel like skin at all. It felt like cold plastic. The kind you get on dolls. The give was wrong under my fingers. The tendons turned into wood. The pulse that should have been there was not there and never had been there. And then it was back, faint and fast. And then it was gone again like a radio station climbing a hill. You'd think that would be the moment I screamed or dropped him. That is not what happened. I took a breath in so big it pressed my ribs out, and I said, "We're almost there, I promise." Sometimes promising is for you and not them. It gave my mouth something to do besides say my own name to hear what would happen. We reached the boundary of the atrium. I don't know how else to call it except a boundary. The light is different there. There's more of it, and it has the color of morning even at night. The boy's hand went soft and warm, and more like a hand again, and I could feel where his knuckles would sit in 20 years, if he got them. His eyes dropped from that fixed point above me, and latched on mine the way a magnet finds the last piece of the chain. He gave me the smallest of smiles, the kind of smile kids do when you pass a test they made up for you and didn't tell you about. And then his fingers slid out of mine like wet string, and he turned without turning, and he was not there the way a lamp is not there when you forget you turned it off. The sound from the arcade pushed at me like a weight. I did not look. I stared at the spot where the boy had been for too long. My radio crackled with a line of static that hit me right in the jaw like pressure change. The PA gave one tired chime. In the reflection on the table, the concourse behind me was empty. "Okay," I said, this time to nobody, and my voice sounded very small and very regular, which is what you want from your voice in a situation like that. I texted Manny. I wrote, "Arcade gate 1 inch. Not going in. Boy in play area." Walked him back. After I typed it, I realized how those words would read if you were half awake on your couch. I hit send anyway. If he thought I was messing around, he could yell at me later. He called a minute after. I stepped outside to answer because, again, rules. The night air felt like it had remembered me as a child and was trying to be kind about it. I picked up and he said, "You're okay." It was not a question, but I said, "Yeah." "What time?" I told him. Arcade gates lifted. Not much, like an inch. "You told me to call you if it was more than that." "Thank you for not going in," he said. And you know when someone is sincere, because their voice gets heavy with the stuff that kept them from sleeping since their 20s. "You're going to go back in. You're going to go to the mechanical room on the west concourse. You know it because we opened it together and the hinge squealed." "Yeah." In the bottom right of the control cabinet, there's a silver lever that looks like a fancy bottle opener. It handles the water curtain test for the atrium. It used to be a showpiece. You see it? I had walked back inside while he was talking, and my feet knew the turns. I stood at the cabinet and opened it, and there it was. The lever. Manny told me how to pull it halfway to test, and then all the way to drop. He told me to do it when I got back to the atrium and had a line of sight to the arcade. "You dropping water," he said, "gives you 30 seconds of cover if it decides it wants to walk. It doesn't like to push through the sheet." "What's it, Manny?" He did not answer. I pulled the lever halfway, and the panel clunked, and then I pushed it back to off. Then I jogged the hallway on feet that were starting to learn the specifics. Where to avoid the soft tile. How the big fake plants make a rustle if the air unit taps them. Where the floor dips a hair because someone fixed a pipe badly in 1999, and the concrete never forgot. When I could see the arcade from the edge of the atrium, I pushed the lever down the rest of the way. For a second, nothing. Then a line formed above the dry fountain, and water fell from the ceiling in a sheet that made the sound of rain inside a closet. It was not the dramatic Vegas waterfall you'd think. It was tired mall water, and it still felt like a miracle. The boy was gone. The arcade gate was up another half-inch compared to when I'd seen it first. The darkness inside it looked slick, like something wet lived right behind the line of things I could name. You'd expect me to work up to stepping closer. I did not. I stood with the falling water between me and everything else, and counted my breaths like an athlete about to run stairs. At breath 8, something on the far side of the water pressed close. You could see it only as a distortion in the sheet, a place where the curve broke wrong, like heat on a road. The water hit it and made a noise like water hitting a plastic tarp. My teeth ached. It was the same feeling you get when you bite ice and your molars remember childhood. My radio keyed. Even with the water hitting the floor, the sound jumped into me. The voice that came through had weight. Not a boy. A man shaped like a father, assembled from 1,000 things I wanted to hear. "Buddy," it said. "I am not your buddy," I thought. "I am a guy who will not say his name in a building." "Buddy," it said again, and it put a sound in the last syllable that my chest knew before my head did. A sound like someone tucking you into bed. It almost got me to step forward just to answer the kindness. That's the trick, you know. It doesn't come at you with knives. It comes at you with the exact weight of the care you've been missing. That's how anything bad gets into you. I took one big step back, and then another. The water kept falling. The shape kept pressing. It didn't push into the sheet. It didn't like to. It held position with the patience of a spider. The gate of the arcade rolled up another fraction of an inch with a jerk. It was like it was breathing with the wrong part of the machine. There are moments where you feel the plot turning. This was one of them. I knew if I walked away, something would pull on that gate until it found daylight. I knew if I went closer, it would find me in a way that would make the word find hurt and glow at the same time. Manny said in my ear, very quiet, very careful, "You keep the water going for 1 minute after life stops inside the curtain. Then you pull the lever. Then you go to the breaker in the arcade hallway, and you cut power to that section. You hear me?" "How do I know life stops?" I asked, surprising myself, because it sounded like a real question and not a thing from a book about pirates. "You'll know," Manny said, and I could hear him moving. He was not at his house anymore. He was in his truck. That made me want to cry because we hadn't promised to care about each other, and he was doing it anyway. "I'm on my way, but don't wait for me to do what I told you." The shape at the water pressed once, harder. The lights overhead did a little hiccup that hurt my eyes. Then, like someone decided to be generous, the presence that was pushing went slack. It pulled back all at once, like a hand under hot water that realized it wasn't playing. The air in the atrium got cooler by an inch. The gate at the arcade rolled down the inch it had climbed. The floor under the water bubbled and then settled as the last push of the pressure washed away. The curtain kept falling and the sound of it ate the other sounds until they were all gone. I counted to 60. I counted slow. When I pulled the lever up, the water cut off and the leftover drips kept talking like rain in leaves. I went to the breaker and threw it. The hum dropped. The neon inside the dead arcade sign went from sleepy to dead. The air exhaled. Manny walked in 2 minutes later, using a key I didn't know he had for the front door. He had not put on a different shirt. He had not put on different shoes. He looked like a man who'd stood up and come because the memory of standing up and coming to save were more trustworthy than his body's need to stay. He didn't say good job. He didn't clap my shoulder. He said, "Come with me." And I went. He took me to the mezzanine. We stood where we had stood earlier and looked down at the tables and the dry coins and the place where the water curtain still wrote a line of shine on the floor. Then he did what I would not have expected from him. He took the paper from his chest pocket and gave it to me. "You keep this in your wallet," he said. "You add to it if you find something else. You copy it for the next person when I tell you to, but you keep the original." "Why me?" "I've been here one night." "Because it liked you," he said, and the way he said it made my throat lock like I had tried to swallow a peach pit. "Because it called you to the place where it lives. Because it tried to put its voice into your ear and the first try didn't work. You said you'd tell me the other 20%, I said. Tell me what it is." He put both hands on the metal railing, and for a second I thought he might lean over and let the space choose. He didn't. He ground his teeth once and shook his head in a way that told me this was a sentence he'd memorized and hated. "The building doesn't like to lose the feeling of being full," he said. "It learned the shape of a crowd, and it didn't want to be empty anymore. People leave little pieces behind when they go. The place puts those pieces together and tries them on. Sometimes it wears them bad. Sometimes it gets close. It likes names. It likes kids because kids pay attention to places. It likes little cracks to push through like the arcade gate. It likes to use the PA because that's the story the building tells itself about how a person gets asked to be somewhere." "That sounds like you're saying the mall is haunting itself." "If I had better words, I would use them," he said. "What I know is this. My kid died here 10 years ago. He ran when he shouldn't have. Friday night, I told him not to. I was working an extra shift and he came to see me with his mom because we were going to get ice cream after. He ran around the fountain and slipped and hit his head on the tile. He didn't get up. He never got up again. There was nothing weird about it. No goth kid with a knife. No ritual. A tile. A skull. A bad fall. Once you have a dead kid in a building, the building finds out what it can do with that. It wears him. It tries to. I hear him sometimes. It tries to make me walk to it. I don't. I do not. I do not. That is my rule. My wife left me 2 years later when we couldn't figure out how to be people again. I stayed in this job because I didn't want another dad to have to find his kid alone. Those are the parts I will say out loud once. You don't get me to say them again. We were quiet together in a way that felt like you lean your shoulder on someone in a crowd to make sure you're both still in the same bus. I put his list in my wallet. It felt heavier than a normal piece of paper because of the oil that generations of hands put into it. There were notes in 2 different styles of handwriting besides his. Whoever started it was dead or long gone. The rules were a logbook. I was in it now. We finished the night together. The time between 3 and 5 is a shape. When you're alone in a big place, it's a donut hole. Nothing in it but the knowledge of its nothing. With Manny there, we cut it into slices. We checked doors. We ran the water in the fountains for 30 seconds. We leaned on railings and wrote down boiler temps. The chime did not sound again. The smell did not come back. The arcade gate stayed right where it was. The boy did not appear. At 5, Manny left to get coffee that he did not drink. I stayed to end my shift because I wanted to prove to myself that I could. The cleaning crew came in at 6 and banged their way into the bathrooms with that particular energy only morning people have. I smiled at them. They did not look at me because they were in their own story, and I was happy that not everyone is in every story. I went home. I slept for 4 hours and woke up at 10 with the heaviness behind my eyes. That means tears you didn't have time for in the night. I sat on the end of my bed and stared at my shoes and decided not to put them on. I decided to text Manny instead. I wrote, "Thanks." He wrote back a picture of a dog. It made me laugh because it wasn't trying to make me talk about the night, and it gave my body permission to be alive. The next night I showed up again. There's a dumb stamp you can get from doing this kind of job. The stamp says, "See, I can keep coming back, so I must not be scared or broken, or a person who rose backward. I want to tell you I came back because of the money, or because I wanted to help Manny. It was both. It was also because I needed to know if the awful thing was an event or a new fact. All right. Here's where the part of me that wants to tell you I'm brave bumps into the part that wants to tell you the truth. There was a new guy on the schedule for the shift after mine. It was a way to give me 2 nights a week off once he got trained. He showed up at 10 to see the place and shadow me and do laps. His name was Dave. He knew it because it was on his funny hat, and because people had said it to him enough, and because it fit his face. He stuck his hand out and said, "Hi, I'm Dave." And my hand took it and squeezed because that's what grown-ups do, and because I did not want to open with, "Don't say that again in the building." We did the route with my mouth dry, and my brain trying to find the way to give rules without sounding like a cult. He was that kind of night person, where they put their energy into jokes, and you want to like them because they tried. He had a girlfriend he didn't love, and a cat he did. He'd been fired from 2 other security gigs for being late, and he knew it was about him and not the world. He had an almost dimple in his left cheek that only showed up when he smiled like he meant it. I know all this because he told me before midnight and looked me in the face and waited for me to say something honest back. By 12:40, I had told him the list. I did it like a story. You make rules sound like a story, and people pretend to swallow them better than if you just write them on a wall. He laughed at the part about not saying your full name and then looked at my face and stopped laughing. He nodded. He asked me why he should walk backwards with a kid. I told him the thing about standing in front of a skittish animal. He got that. He said he would try to be a person who did the right thing even if doing it looked dumb. I took that like a promise. At 1:12, he keyed the radio and said, "Badge 3," because I told him to get used to it. His voice sounded too loud in my ear. He was at the shoe store taking a picture of the poster with the lady's hands because, in his words, her eyes are that dartboard from a bar I used to go to. I told him to meet me at the atrium. He said copy. He sounded like a man playing walkie-talkie and not like a man being shaped by the space around him. That made me happy. At 1:47, the aquarium store gave a sigh like it had cattle in it. A long animal sigh. We both froze. We were close enough to see under the edge of the gate. A thin line of light painted our knuckles. The smell came thin and slow like it was embarrassed to be itself. Cinnamon. Dave looked at me with eyebrows high, and I shook my head and pointed us back the other way. He moved. Good student. We let the East Concourse have itself, and we took ourselves to where the lights felt like they belonged to us. At 2:13, like a watch on a wrist, the west lights did their blink. I told him to stop. We did. We listened for the follow-up click that meant the timer had finished its little tantrum. While we held still, I saw the reflection get laid in the store window across from us. I expected it, so it didn't get me the same way. I showed him without moving. I said, "Look at your breathing." He did. He watched himself lag by a breath and said very softly, "Huh," like he was staring at the ocean for the first time. At 2:16, the PA chimes came in. It was like hearing someone rehearse your name in a different room. Dave lifted his chin and listened for the voice after. It did not come. It never does if you want it to. You have to be open for it to move in. It likes a little space to go to work on. We finished the round. We came back to the atrium. At 2:29, my phone rang with an unknown number. I stepped outside to answer and heard the wind run across the parking lot and smack the flag on the pole like a kid running by and slapping lockers. I said hello and got silence, and then a small digital click, like the person on the other end put their teeth on the microphone. I hung up. When I went back inside, Dave was at the edge of the play area, 1 foot on carpet and 1 foot on tile, staring at the place where the tree had been. "Did you hear that?" he asked without looking at me. "Hear what?" "Kid laughing," he said. "This place used to be fun." Every feeling in me lined up and pointed toward the arcade. The gate was down. The darkness was a normal darkness. The water curtain lever felt like a hot coin in my pocket even though it wasn't in my pocket. The idea of it was. I put a hand on Dave's shoulder the way you do when you kiss a friend on the forehead to ground them. "Hey," I said, casual because that's how you get people to look at you. "Let's go hit the mechanical room. You haven't seen the bottom of the boiler pressure log. He turned. He smiled. His almost dimple tried to be brave. He said, "Okay." And he said it in a way that did not convince me he was going to walk where I pointed just because I asked. We made it to the hall. I pushed the door open with my hip, because that way my hands could stay close to him if he decided to change his mind about where his feet should be. He changed his mind. He did it with a single muscle in his jaw that I could almost hear click. He stepped around me and walked back toward the atrium. I followed because pretending I wasn't going to follow would have been bull. When I caught up to him, he had his head tilted to the side like dogs do when you say a word they know. He looked like he was listening to something very precise. He walked to the edge of the carpet the way you walk to a casket. I said his badge number like it was a code. He did not answer. He took one step onto the darker carpet, and the air in the atrium got that cloth smell that rooms get when they hold their breath. He put his other foot down, and the lights in the far corridor got warmer by a degree. I knew in my bones that if I reached for him too fast, I would catch someone else who wasn't him, and I'd have to find a way to put them back. I said, "Dave," and as soon as the second syllable left my mouth, the PA repeated it back at me with a tiny delay. Not the voice. My voice. That scared me in a way nothing had in 2 nights. It didn't try to be a boy. It didn't try to be a dad. It tried to be me. Dave sucked in a breath, and I realized I had broken the name rule I had beaten into my own head. I said it again, but this time I said 3. He glanced at me the way you look up from a math problem when someone drops a book. He looked like a man who needed to make a choice about which story he was in. "Come on," I said. "We'll do the boiler. You can tell me about your cat again. Does he like boxes? We'll figure out his box preference. This is important to the protection of America." He almost laughed. Being ridiculous is a tool. Then the radio keyed and the chime rolled out, and a boy's chuckle came in soft and honest in a way that made the hairs on my arms all sit up together like a field of wheat. Dave's eyes fixed on something a foot to the left of my shoulder and a foot above, the exact spot the other boy had been stuck on. He took a step forward. "Don't," I said with a voice I did not recognize as mine. It had the shape of a scared dad and a good boss, and a guy who has seen what happens when you stop listening to yourself. "Take my hand. We're walking backwards. Eyes on me." He let me have his hand. That felt like a miracle. He squeezed once. I did not cry. We took 2 backward steps, both of us watching each other like we were each trying to catch a fact that was moving faster than we wanted. I could feel the room get interested in us. That's a creepy sentence, but it's exactly how it felt. The space wanted to know if we were going to be the kind of animal that moved according to its rules or ours. We kept moving back. On the 4th step, the carpet under his foot turned into a surface that didn't know one name for itself. He stumbled. I kept my balance by thinking about stairs. "We've got it," I said. "This is easy. You're good." He nodded and his eyes came back to me, and then something to my left made a soft footfall like a heavy cat. I did not look. I kept my eyes on a little scar on Dave's eyebrow. It was white in the light and told me a story of a childhood bike. We kept going until tile touched both our heels, and then we took one more step, and the air behind him let go the way a magnet lets go when you flip its poles. We stood on tile. We did the ugly breathe where you make a little noise with your mouth open because you forgot how to breathe in the right order for a second. The PA stayed quiet. The arcade gate stayed shut. I pulled the lever for the water curtain because I wanted the barrier more than I wanted to pretend I didn't. The water fell for 30. Nothing pressed it. It still helped. Dave laughed then. A single kind of nasty laugh that had shame in it. "What the hell?" he said. "What is that?" "The building doesn't like to be alone," I said. "It asks. You don't have to say yes." He looked down at our hands like he had just realized we were still holding them. He squeezed again, and then let go and wiped his palm on his pants like a boy who has to get something off that isn't there. He did not look angry. He looked like a person who had been asked to do something and decided not to, and had to live with that. That is better than anger. We did not stay near the play area. We did not give the place the courtesy of our backs. We moved the energy elsewhere. That's a sentence Manny would have said, and I would have laughed the first night. The second night I got him. We sat in the mechanical room for a while with the boiler noise keeping us human. I told Dave about Manny's kid. I did it blunt and without detail. He did not try to joke. He sat with it like you would a bowl that might be hot. At 3:10, Manny texted me that he was up and if I needed food. I told him not to come. He told me he was proud of me. I put the phone face down and didn't tell Dave that part because he needed his own thing and not mine. We split the night after that. I took one loop. He took another. We met at crossings and did little nods that people do when they're tired and don't want to make their mouth make words. At 4:03, my radio gave a soft double click like someone keying without a voice. At 4:30, we heard water moving where there was no water. At 4:51, the lights in the West Concourse blinked one extra time for nobody. The world spun and tried to make us slip. We didn't. The new part happened right at the end, when people think it's safe. At 5:40, when the first trash truck in the lot rattles the windows, and the sky thinks about being a color. Dave said, "I'm going to hit the restroom." And I said, "Okay." And the sound of the door swinging closed behind him made that little fart noise doors make when they have been counting heartbeats all night. I stood near the information kiosk, which is funny because the only information it had was a sun-faded map that made the stores look like fossils. I looked at the dot that said, "You are here." I love that dot because there's a weird virtue in having someone tell you that you are, in fact, here. The PA chime sounded. It sounded normal, the way it would before an announcement about Santa pictures. Then Manny's voice came through. I didn't know it by the sound first. I knew it because the part of me that had got used to his language recognized the shape. "Do you copy?" it said. "Badge 4. You think I didn't want to answer? You think the name rule was a little thing I had to hold too tight to make it work?" I didn't answer. I waited. The silence rolled by. Then he spoke again, and it was Manny. Not the thing wearing Manny as a joke. Manny, with his tired eyes, and the way he said the vowels like they had been sanded down by sleep. "I'm in the lot," he said. "Can't see you through the glass. Let me in." I put my hand on the push bar of the door and didn't push. He had keys. Always. Why would he ask me that? My brain offered me 3 good reasons, and each of them felt like a cheap bracelet that looked expensive from far away. I took my hand off the bar and backed up 2 steps. The PA did not pop to disconnect. It breathed. "Buddy," Manny said next. That's what broke it. He does not call me that. He calls me man when he is tired and kid when he is being gentle on purpose, and my badge number when he is reminding me we are not friends only because we are something else. He does not call me buddy. I walk toward the mechanical room instead of the doors. I move slow because that is how you tell a place you are not a toy. Dave came out of the restroom at the junction. He looked clean and happy to be clean the way anyone is at sunrise. "Manny's here?" he asked, because he had heard it too. "No," I said. "The space wants us to make it easier to come in." He nodded like he had known that all along and was just checking if we would agree. We went together to the mezzanine because I like to see the whole thing at once when I'm trying to think. The mall looks like a diagram from up there. Big squares of need, long lines of want. You can see how long a person is between the fountain and the doors. You can see how far a sound has to travel to lose its clothes and become something else. The lights by the front doors flashed like someone took a picture. Then again. I closed my eyes and did not look because I knew it would look like a face if I let it. The PA chime sounded, and then a sentence came through in a voice that was almost my mother's. "Please proceed to the closest exit," it said. "A fire has been reported in your area." No smoke, no heat, no alarm panel chirping in the hallway where the panel lives. A perfect sentence in a voice the building must have saved from years of holiday hours. That's the worst part. The mall had trained us our whole lives to jump when it spoke with that tone, and even when it was empty, it could still move that old training around like furniture. Dave looked toward the stairwell. I shook my head. "Not unless we see fire." 5 seconds later, smoke curled under the restroom door. Real smoke, gray and impatient. I swore, a simple, ugly word, and we both moved. I pulled the pull station on the wall because at some point this became a 3-body problem, and I needed one of the bodies to be a city employee who would require forms. The horn stuttered to life with a low battery kind of whine, but it was loud enough to make me flinch. Dave grabbed the fire extinguisher on the pillar and pulled the pin. I kicked the restroom door. It opened too fast and smoke made me cough like a cartoon. It smelled like an outlet on fire. Plastic softening. I dropped to a knee because I'm not completely dumb and crawled to the stalls. The smoke came from the trash can where someone had jammed a wad of paper towels into a poorly wired automatic air freshener. The plug was blackening. The sparks had caught the paper towels and the plastic faceplate was working on being a candle. That was all. Not the end of the world. Not a demon. Not a kid trapped. An accident that needed a hand. I said, "Hit it." And Dave hit it, and the fire went out like it meant nothing. The horn kept going, and when he let go of the handle, we both looked at the blackened plastic and then at each other. He opened his mouth to make a joke about bathrooms and electrical engineering, and I shook my head. Not now. The horn stopped on its own 20 seconds later. The PA chime sounded. A woman's voice, too friendly for 4 in the morning. "Thank you for shopping," it said. "Please visit us again soon." And that right there is a sentence that should not be heard by 2 grown men crouched in a smoky restroom in an empty mall. We laughed. We laughed because it was either that or scream, and on the scale of things we wanted to admit to ourselves later, laughing was an easier box to tick. The rest of the shift was paperwork. Sometimes paperwork feels like a spell. You put things in boxes and the boxes get the ideas instead of your heart. I wrote up the fire. I wrote up the chimes. I wrote up PA anomalies continue, responded by running water curtain test. That part made me feel like an adult, even though I had to look up how to spell anomalies. The cleaning crew came in and said nothing. The morning guard, Alex, walked in and said, "Wow, you look like a yanked tooth," and then apologized and handed me a coffee. Manny texted me, "You did good." Then a second later he texted, "Do not say that to yourself inside yet." I didn't, but I did let the good burn off some of the fear like fog off a pond. I kept at that job for 3 months. That's 3 months of nights talking to someone who wants to be someone. 3 months of water we could turn on like a shield. 3 months of the worst time in a room being the few seconds after the chime when your brain decides which sound to believe. I learned more rules. If the pressure drops in the water lines in the West Concourse, you go to the stairwell and count to 20, and then walk very fast. If the mannequin with the cracked neck faces a different way than it did 2 hours ago, put it in the maintenance corridor and shut the door. If you smell bleach in the mechanical room and there's nobody cleaning, leave the building and walk the perimeter until the air forgets. If someone calls your phone and it's a number 1 digit off from Manny's, don't say hello. Don't say anything. We were not perfect. Sometimes I said my name out loud to remind myself I had one. When I did, the PA liked to repeat it back in a voice that wasn't mine and wasn't anybody's. It's like the system coughed on it. Manny made a face at me when he found out. He marked the night on the list. We both put our thumbs on that paper like church. We kept each other honest by saying the quiet part with our heads against the cool rail of the mezzanine so the building's breath would carry it away. Then Dave stopped showing up. I don't have a dramatic story for you about that night. He was there, and then he wasn't. He texted at 7 in the evening to say he'd be late to start because his cat knocked over a glass and he needed to find the shards. He texted me a picture of his cut finger with the Band-Aid and a face drawn on it. I told him to knock it off. He never came in. He didn't answer when I called at 10. At midnight, I texted his girlfriend, who used too many exclamation points, and she said he wasn't home. At 2, Manny showed up because he had the feeling. We walked the loop with that good panic that keeps you from throwing up while you look. We checked the maintenance corridor behind the anchor store because if the building ever learns how to make you think that hallway is the right choice, it will. We opened doors we didn't like and stared into air that stared back. We did not find him. He didn't die in the mall. That would have been a gift compared to what happened. He got in his truck after he texted me and pulled out of his parking spot and his phone pinged, and he looked down at it for 1 second, and a woman who fell asleep at the wheel at a 4-way stop drifted into the intersection. Nobody was going fast. Nobody meant it. The angle was wrong. A nothing speed turned into a terrible angle, his neck into an equation. He hit the headrest with the bad part of him, and the paramedics came, and doing something isn't the same as saving. His girlfriend told me in the parking lot of a grocery store. She said he died before they touched him, even though they touched him as hard as they could. She cried in a way that made me involuntarily step back, because I didn't want the mall to think I was bringing something home to share. I didn't tell the building. That sounds stupid and mystical, and I don't care. I didn't say his name out loud. Manny didn't say it either. We texted it and kept the sound of it out of the air. The mall got it anyway. It gets everything eventually. The next week, around the time the lights pop on the West Concourse, the PA chime rang, and a voice that wasn't Dave, but tried to be said, "Hey," and I had to walk very fast to the stairwell and put my head on the cool cinder block and count to 20 and imagine each number being a nail putting shut a box. The last night I worked there was not noble. I did not fight a thing with a lever. I did not save a kid. I did not choose their safety over mine. The mall closed for good. The aquarium store folded. The nail salon moved into a strip mall surrounded by fewer ghosts. The city finally decided storage was better than nothing. The construction crew came during the day and cut squares in the walls, and did their measures and took pictures with their phones with full batteries. At night, I was there to keep people out and keep the building from doing what it liked to do when left alone. It was sad. Even if I hated how it tried to be alive, I felt sad. It's hard to stand in a place that held so much loud life and know that now it is going to hold silence with locks on it. My last lap at 4:50 in the morning, I stopped at the dry fountain and took one coin and put it in my pocket again like I had the first night. I thought maybe I'd keep it. Maybe I'd throw it in a different fountain and move the story somewhere else. The PA chime sounded once, polite. It did that when the day restarted sometimes, like a little cough. Then a voice came through I hadn't heard before. Or I had, but not in this place. It said my name, my full first and last name, the way my grandmother would have said it when she wanted to find me under the table. It landed on the tile around me like you drop keys. I closed my eyes, and the whole mall pressed close the way a bus full of people does when it stops short. It said my name a second time, and then, in a small voice that didn't have to travel far, "You left your coffee." That broke me. I always do. I leave my coffee on the security desk by the doors. Manny bugs me about it. I go back for it, and it means another 2 minutes in the building before I get to turn my face toward the parking lot and be a person again. The PA had noticed, or the building had, or the part of me that stayed behind different nights had. I had never told it that about me. It doesn't matter. Things like this are good at knowing what you'll pick up if they put it where you can't not see it. I put the coin back in the ring with the other dead luck. I walked to the desk, and there was my coffee cup with my name scrawled on it by a bored teenager earlier in the evening, who had no idea they were naming a thing in a place that liked to own names. I picked it up, not drinking, just holding, like a ritual object. I walked to the doors. I pushed them. The night touched my face and then pulled off me like plastic wrap. I kept going until my foot hit the parking lot crack that looks like a river on the asphalt. I turned around, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I'm telling you this so you know I am not above the smaller urges. I looked back, and the mall looked like a theater set with only one actor on stage. Me. The lights glowed behind me, and the front doors reflected me, and the PA chime sounded one more time. Then silence. The building let me go without a line, which is a gift. My last act before I got into my car was to take Manny's list out of my wallet and put it in the glove box. That way, if the mall decided to have me when I sat down, the rules would be in my car, not in the building. I drove to Manny's house at 6 because he had texted me that he would be awake. He put the list back in his pocket where it lives. He made us eggs like dads do when dads have a kitchen. He sent me home with 2 baggies of leftovers that I would forget in my fridge because of course I did. That was 6 months ago. Sometimes I hear the 2-note chime in the grocery store when the freezer section does its hum. Sometimes a kid laughs with the exact weight of the mall's air under it. And I look up and my eyes water, and I pretend I'm tired. I have dreams where the mezzanine is a cliff, and I am walking backward, holding a hand that is sometimes warm, and sometimes plastic, and sometimes not there at all. I wake up, and the room smells like cinnamon for a second, and then like my shampoo. I throw a coin in any fountain I see, and for half a second I hope nothing hears me wish. People ask me if I'm going to do another night shift, if I miss it. I tell them no and yes. You can miss a thing that tried to learn your face. You can miss the quiet that tasted like battery. You can miss Manny's voice on the radio when he pretended it was no big deal that he came in on his night off because something in him remembered one more thing than his pain needed to. I don't miss the chime. I don't miss the lagging reflection. I don't miss the way a sound can make the air around your heart feel like someone is drawing a circle with chalk. Do I think the mall was haunted? That word is a hat people put on a lot of different weather. The building learned from us. It collected the heat and sweat and radio checks and first kisses and hard fights and birthday cupcake breath and last goodbyes under fluorescent lights. It learned that if it said your name, you'd come. If you've worked nights, you know what I mean. Every building is an animal a little bit. Ours just didn't have anyone to tamp it down anymore. It did what animals do when they're hungry. It called. It used whatever voice made sense. One day I'll walk by the storage units where the arcade used to be. 10 by 10s with metal roll-up doors like little mouths. There will be new rules written on new paper for new guards. Do not let the units stay lifted an inch. Do not use names inside. If you hear a sound like water where there isn't any, stand by at the junction and wait it out. The building will make new noises. It will learn the new patterns. It will wobble the reflection of the guy with a clipboard who thinks he can eat lunch on the mezzanine because nobody else is around to tell him no. If I run into him, I'll tell him to find a fountain even if it's in a different city. Run the water for 30 seconds. Remind yourself you're something heavy and good that moves. Then put the coin back. Always put the coin back. You don't want to owe the space anything. You want to leave it with its own wishes and keep yours where your coin knows your pocket is. I've got the coin from that last night still. I lied when I said I put it back. I reached into my pocket outside the door and realized my hand was empty. And for the first time in years, I went back on purpose. I put my hand under the lip of the dry fountain and felt around until I found a coin that felt like mine. I palmed it and walked out without looking up. That coin sits on my dresser now. Sometimes when I come home late, I touch it before I turn on the light. It's the dumbest thing, but it is also the most reasonable measure you ever heard from a guy who learned the rules of a place that didn't want to be only a place. I still don't say my full name out loud after midnight. I don't know if that rule stops at the edge of a mall. I don't care. If my phone rings and the number is 1 digit off from Manny's, I do not answer. I call him in the morning instead, and we talk about eggs and weather and what he's growing in his little yard. Sometimes he asks me if I want to visit the mezzanine. We can look down at the tables again, he says, like we're debating a restaurant. He's joking, but he's not. The mall is sealed now, windows bolted, doors boarded, yellow tape that turns into trash in the wind. Somewhere inside, a plastic tree remembers making kids sticky, and a gate remembers the exact weight at which it balances itself open 1 kiss wider than an inch. Somewhere inside, a PA system sits quiet, waiting for a sound that fits. If you asked me to bet whether it still knows our names, I wouldn't. It doesn't need me to bet. That would be me saying it out loud. If you work nights, you get it. You watch the world sleep and you keep it safe, and sometimes it needs things from you that aren't on the form. That's the job and also not. You take the money. You take the rules. You carry a list that smells like other people's pockets. You keep your own name close. And when something says it back to you from a speaker that hasn't worked since the 90s, you don't say yes. You get to the bright part, slow and backward. You keep your eyes where they're supposed to be. You don't look at the gate. You don't let the water stop until life on the other side does. Then you write it down like a good guard. Then you go home and you touch a coin, and your coffee is where you left it. It will call again. Places like that always do. That's not the question. The only question is whether you keep walking when the chime sounds. Whether you hold out your hand for someone and let the building decide if it will be gentle long enough to let you both make it to the light. I did once. I got lucky. If you want to be good at this job, you learn to call luck by the names it can live with. You learn to say thank you without saying your name. You learn to go forward, sometimes backwards, to something that looks like morning.